Everybody, happy Friday. Welcome back to another edition of the Ad Podcast. On this Friday afternoon, we have Pierre DeBois, who is the founder and CEO of Zimana. We connected at a business analytics conference back in Arizona and wasn't able to interview him on the ground, but I'm excited to do this follow-up. So Pierre is also a speaker on the topic of marketing analytics at conferences like Inbound, CodeMash, Content Marketing World, to name a few. But Pierre, thanks so much for coming on. Appreciate you spending some time with us.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you for taking the time to talk. So I love it.
Yeah, let's go. So, I always like to start off with people's origin stories, learn a little bit more about how you got into this industry. So why don't you tell us a little bit more about, who you are, where you came from, where'd you go to school, and how'd you get into this line of work?
Okay, so my entire life in 15 seconds. I am a Gary, Indiana native.
Okay.
And how I got here was sort of a lot of little happy accidents or career changes, basically. My initial career was to be an engineer at Ford Motor Company and be an automotive engineer. That was my childhood dream. I made cars out of cardboard, gave me a strong interest in math and science. And in my undergraduate, I pursued mechanical engineering and got my mechanical engineering degree through Prairie View A&M. Started at Purdue, but my heart is Prairie View A&M in Ahara, Texas, right outside of Houston. And it led into an 8-year career in automotive engineering. And while I was there, I liked what I did, Dylan. It was great. It was a childhood dream. I also wanted to get into other areas of management. I had this interest in venture capital. And to be honest with you, I was a little naive about VC at the time. I had this grand idea of helping out minority businesses through starting a VC of my own, which,
oh, wow.
Yeah, it sounds like, simple, but it's really hard to do. And
well, it's kind of a popular framework these days, but you must have been doing that, kind of before it became in vogue.
Yeah, it was, and the way I say naive is that some things are for entrepreneurship are about timing. So for VC, they're looking for these high rate of return businesses. But at that time, there were minority businesses were growing, but not in the industry sectors that a VC would typically look at. And that was a hard thing I didn't know until I went off to grad school. But I ended up graduating. I graduated from Georgia Tech. And grad school was not quite perfect. I actually had started at Carnegie Mellon, but changed over to Georgia Tech, got done there. And when I got out of that, I still kind of was a little bit free floating about what I really wanted to do. Didn't want to go into automotive management for automotive industry because there were some things I saw that I didn't quite like. But the good fortune was I had a relative who started her own business. She was a contractor in Huntsville, Alabama. Government contractor, had 1,500 people under employ, and they were having problems with some of their contracts. And I jumped on board, and one of the things that came out of it was, how do we know that people are reviewing our websites to understand who we are as a contractor and then partner? And that's how I got introduced to Google Analytics. I did this training on my own, and I wasn't sure I could do a business out of it, but it helped out there. And then I had a chance to go to New York, and I did for a short period. I worked with an ad agency, Media Contacts, which was under the Havas Group. Yeah. And it to be honest with you, it did not. It was 6 months there, and then when they did layoffs, they even laid off the person who hired me. So welcome to New York. And at that time, I still have my website up. I've been thinking about trying to start a business, and I just said, you know what? We're here in New York. If you can't make it here, if you can make it here, you can make it anywhere. And I took that to heart and started 16 years ago as a web analytics strategist. So that's what brought me here.
That's awesome. So, the world of marketing analytics, especially Google products, I think, the biggest disruption that we're seeing right now is the ability to leverage AI for kind of quantitative evaluation of these massive data sets and having these data sets talk to each other, which was always a problem before. But what are you thinking about most as it pertains to how AI is now a part of the conversation in marketing analytics?
Yeah, that's a terrific question. It is disruptive. I'll say that much. It shifts where a lot of the analysis can be done. There were a lot of things with R and Python that you really did need to have a data analyst to come in and do. I think AI simplifies things, and I say this with some caution because a lot of people say, "Well, this is where you should throw out the analyst." Not necessarily. AI, if you think about it, is really a sophisticated statistics in action. We're able to merge a lot of different things with data, with whether it's on a database or a spreadsheet, and then be able to do some basic things like exploratory data analysis, maybe regressions, maybe a decision tree. But you still need human insight to know how these things are being put together, because underneath, it's still taking tokens and it's making a response based on likelihood. The analogy I always give the customers who aren't statistically inclined is, think of it this way. Yes, you could pay for a football game, but you wouldn't pay for a quarterback to throw Hail Marys all the time. It's not football. So what you want to do is you want a quarterback who knows how to read the defense and adjust plays. And AI will make some great adjustments. I think it'll help for analysts to streamline the work. I think we're going to see a lot of great things in terms of how the tools will change. I just read where Google Analytics is now having a what's called a model context protocol being included under analytics, which I think is really exciting and a little bit different. But I think at the end of the day, you still want to have some insight to tie the responses back to the things that businesses are looking for. A lot of times, doing a regression sounds great, but you still need to tie that back to the business objectives. And I think this is where the analysts will, they're going to have to be a little bit more sophisticated in how to use AI. But I think the challenge will be, met because we have a lot of smart people in this industry.
Yeah, that's great. So many people are fearful of AI as a job replacement or taking their roles, but the more technologists that I actually hear that are in the weeds with some of these tools, it's just shortening busy work. It's making people more productive. It allows them to do things that used to take a long time to get done in seconds or minutes, but it still takes human insight and human direction, even on the prompting side, to really make sense of it and make it valuable and make it actionable.
Definitely.
Okay. So what would you say, like when you start working with a new client, like when you go in and start talking to somebody, what are some of the major things that you're looking for that you can have an impact on? What are like two or the three biggest things that people just aren't doing right with their Google Analytics when you kind of come in and starting to evaluate, get the lay of the land on a new opportunity?
Dylan, that's a terrific question, because I think, tying back to what we just talked about, while everyone's looking for AI and everything else, there's still some basics that people don't do. There's still this sort of set it and forget it mentality, which I think, to Google's credit, I think they sort of foster that at the beginning, because if you think about where analytics really started, they were logs. And you had to figure out, how a web page is not just a page. It's not like a PDF. There's actual elements to it. And those logs, originally back in the day, people had to figure out, which logs are what. Google Analytics, Omniture, before it became Adobe Analytics, all these things came around to help smooth that out and make it a little bit more palatable for the analysts, which made it easier for marketers to do. But there's still some people that tend to kind of forget the tags after they're added, and they don't really follow up on the reporting. They don't do the export. So there's still some people that do that. I think the thing I look for when I talk to clients is, a lot of times I tell clients it's okay to have this high level idea, but analytics, if you think about the word analysis, it's Greek for breakdown. So you're trying to figure out what's driving an objective. Sales is the most obvious, but there may be other ones too. Maybe you need sales in a particular region, and you need to figure out how well your web traffic is coming from a particular region that you've targeted. One of my earliest clients, we actually spent time doing that. He was a very good client of mine. Unfortunately, it passed away. I think by year 6, I think was when it happened. He had a music business. He literally had a studio, a band, and then he had recording artists as well. And the challenge was trying to figure out, where the most traffic was coming for him, so that way he knew where to spend his digital ads, and even with social media, where to connect with people. Mm-hmm. Having that direction and trying to see how you're doing with it is the easiest thing you can do right now. It's probably the best baseline. There are other nuanced analysis that have come into play over the years. Google Analytics could do cohort analysis, but you can also export the data into R or Python, and then you can do even more sophisticated statistical analysis on that data. But right now, I think the biggest thing is I always tell clients, don't just wait for a lot of data to make an analysis. Even if you have a little bit, you can get some sense of what direction you're going, and just ask yourself, does it make sense for what you have planned? And don't treat it as a failure, treat it as guidance for seeing how you're doing. That's all that is.
Interesting. And then I imagine you mentioned a lot of people are concerned with measurement. So, Google is notorious for taking credit for a lot of sales activity, because historically intent has been tied to search activity. Do you see that changing at all now with, you've got all the, I'm hearing from a lot of people that organic search is falling in certain categories and in certain keyword terms because people are going to ChatGPT or AI tools to start queries when they used to just go to Google. Like, it used to be a verb, right? You Google it and then you find and you do your own research and then you click through and maybe you buy the thing that you're looking for. But now people are starting more of their I'm thinking about something. Instead of going to Google, they go to maybe ChatGPT half the time. How is AI kind of changing the way that people, find information and visit websites?
It's a turbulent time, to be honest with you. And we've been marching to this really for a while. If you go back even so many years, remember when Amazon, there was a whole, I was going to say kerfluffle. I'm not sure that's a word anymore or not, but I'll take it. There was all this hand-wringing about customers starting their search at Amazon rather than at Google. And so we've had that go on. This is also another play, because you see some things not only with ChatGPT and with Claude. I personally love Claude personally. Yeah. But we also see things even on Google's side with Gemini and a whole idea of having AI overview and whether or not it's driving traffic. I think we're going to struggle with this just a little bit while longer. But I think the challenge for everyone, I think, is there's two things you got to keep in mind. One is, whenever you see these sort of technology changes, you need to keep in mind your customers may not be keeping up with it immediately. So I wouldn't lose, granted, I'm a bald gentleman right now. I wouldn't lose my hair over what's going on immediately. Think of it as an automobile. There's new technologies placed in a car, but just because whether it's Tesla or General Motors putting the new technology in, that doesn't mean that if you hear about it, that you turn around and drop everything and go buy the car right then and there. You usually buy a car when you need it. Yeah. Customers are, particularly B2B, tend to lag on the adoption a little bit. The best thing to do is looking and seeing how customers and like things like DTC, direct to customer, how that adoption is shaping and coming into play. And we're going to see some struggle with that for a while. I just even read that there was 2 sites, I think Amazon was one of them, where they actually had placed some sort of code to make it harder for AI to scan their websites. I'm still not even sure why they've done that. So there's a lot of these little things that are going on. I think as a marketer, you want to keep a little bit of a log together. You can do that in Evernote, or even ironically in Notebook LM, which is based on Gemini. But you can use these things to kind of keep track of articles and where trends are going. That's one big part of it. And I think the other thing is, really thinking a little bit about where your channels are and where you're building community with customers. I think that's the other thing that you have to be looking at, because that's a big push, whether you're talking about social media, email, and even these days with podcasts and social audio. People are building communities with their customers to educate, have the customers participate, and then also a little bit of branding going on as well.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned something interesting too with Gemini, and I've noticed this even, when I use Google instead of going to ChatGPT. In the past, you would Google something and then you'd get a list of sites, but you'd have to click through in order to do the research. But now with Gemini, you get the answers up top of page and you don't even have to go down and look at the websites. So you're essentially getting your answer question. You're getting your question answered like in the search browser itself, so you don't need to click through. And it's really those clicks and then being able to drop a cookie and then retarget that person. That's like the marketer's dream, is to be able to get you on site so then they can track you afterwards. How much is that an impact as far as just people visiting websites less even during their research phase, even if they're not quite ready to go down funnel and purchase something?
That's a very good question. That's going to lead to another point I was going to bring up. It means now, I think as marketers, we really have to look at our content, because what AI is doing now is that if you ever use ChatGPT, Claude, or Gemini, even Perplexity, you'll see that when you query, there's a little bit of this thinking going on. You'll see that, hey, we're reasoning and going through it. And then when they provide an answer, you can actually click on links, or they will have a little window that will show where these answers were sourced. When AI was first introduced, that wasn't available. Today, they're doing that now to incorporate a little bit more at search, which means it does mean the websites go away, but what it does mean is that they are incorporating elements from those websites. And if you're one of those websites, if you're optimized well with great content and providing ideas or things that people can use that may answer queries that customers may be using within AI, there's still a chance that you'll get reference. It's just that it won't come with the links and the metadata detail that you would normally see in search. We've been geared around that for longer than I've been in business, frankly. And that was built around a time when the web was built for research, finding research papers. And it just so happened that marketers picked up on this and said, hey, let's put together white papers, helpful pages on our websites. Those things will still be important, but we need to think more critically about where those things can be searchable really with AI at some level, because that is where we're marching towards. And these are the ways that we get discovered. And I think it means our websites will have to be rethought a little bit in terms of how it serves the customer and where we meet customers, basically, whether it's in groups or other places online.
Yeah. And then what about, like, is there such a thing as AI SEO optimization yet? Is that a specialty that's popping up? Like, can you, I don't want to say gamify, but can you create your content in a way that gives you a better chance in showing up in some of these research models through these different LLM?
I've actually written an article on this. I would say it's sort of here, but it's with the air quotes, basically.
The Wild West.
The challenge is that AI is incorporating search much more frequently. The challenge is that there's because of the fact you're not seeing a link and metadata, which is supposed to be part of SEO. It's sort of a catch-22. Those things are still important, but they're more important for the AI rather than someone in a search window. So your planning focuses more on using natural language in your content, something that the AI can something that AI, I don't want to say AI bot, but maybe it's like AI search script can pick up and then see how it fits within a query. And I think to get to that, you need to think about what are the questions that your customers are thinking about. And there's a lot of ways in business you can do that. If you have an AI assistant within your web page or website, that can also be a source of discovering what are the questions that are coming up all the time for your customers. I think it's sort of it's a catch-22. It's like our SEO is not changing entirely, yet at the same time we're still kind of we know we have to use natural language. But then the challenge becomes where in SEO, we had certain places within a website that we could work with. The metadata on links, metadata in the description of a web page. They are still somewhat important, but not to the audience who probably will see it. They're kind of important to the AI. Where our audience is, we have to figure out how do we engage people a little bit better online. And it's going to be much more dynamic, at least. That's probably the easiest way to think of it.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. So you're out there all the time giving talks on topics around marketing analytics and some of these things that we're going through today. What are the themes that you are seeing, and what are the keynotes that you're being asked to prepare on behalf of these different conferences? And when you go in and do keynotes for corporations, what are people most excited to learn from you these days?
Ooh, this is a good question because I have two sets of audiences, and both are looking for AI, and give me a second, AI.
Wow.
So, but they're a little bit different. I have some developer audience. These are people that are they're data scientists, some developers who are using Python, particularly with R programming. I'm actually teaching at two universities now on R, and they're usually are interested in interacting with the model, and then taking that data and kind of looking at how to come up with better queries, how to fit that within their environment. There are now APIs for Claude, for Gemini, I believe, and also for definitely for OpenAI for the Chat GPT as well. And there are packages in R that will let you extract that, and then you can use that data within your own model within R. And it's the same thing for Python as well. So you have that audience who's interested, and then you have the marketers who are they're definitely interested in features ranging from things like with like Notebook LM. There's now you can do a number of features, including there's a video overview that he just introduced that's really good. And they're not quite into the weeds of the programming, but unfortunately, I still have to kind of understand a little bit of how they function and some programming to narrow that back to how to explain things simply. It's just like if you were buying a car, or a Corvette. Some customers just want the Corvette convertible. I just want to know that I can drive. They know there's a V8 now in the mid-engine, but they don't know the difference between the ZR1 versus the base level Corvette versus the E-Ray. I think of the ZR, and then the ZR1X, which is the one with the 5.5 rear V8 with the electric motors in the front. They don't care about that much detail. They just know it's a two-seater, and that's their reward car. So you have audiences. That's how AI is. It's almost like a two-dimensional Corvette. Some people want to know the engineering, and some people just want to know the general pieces. So those sort of trends, I'm using my time this year really to sort through quite a bit. At Marketing Analytics Summit, my presentation was mostly on some basics, going beyond Google Analytics into some of the advanced pieces, and some of it also touched upon AI as well too, and giving people kind of that stepping stone to figure out where they are along that trajectory. Everyone's at different points basically right now.
Yeah, that makes sense. So, as a firm, you've helped a lot of small to medium size, kind of mid-market enterprise and corporations. Is there a reason that you've decided to focus on those sectors versus, Fortune 500, where, a lot of people like to go chase, bigger logos? Is there a reason that you kind of decided to want to be helpful to those small to medium size and mid-level firms?
Yeah, there is, and a lot of it deals with technology. Those firms, while they may not be the size of a I was going to say General Motors. I'm going to date myself out, but any large company basically. But they're not the size of a Microsoft. They're not the size of an Intel. The challenge is that they usually have the same metrics that you would use in Google Analytics for a large company ends up being the same metrics you use for a mid-sized company. And so the next question becomes, when you're looking at how to plan a dashboard, how to plan your KPIs, you got to look at things that each company can execute on. And that's the part that I love about this. I explained to somebody else, there's nothing cookie cutter about analytics at all, because you have to take metrics and tie it back to a business objective, and every business could be different. I can work, Dylan, I can work with two bakeries that one could be making apple cobbler and the other one could be making apple pie. If I was working on a search, the one for apple pie might be a little different. They might have services for teaching people how to bake their apple pie. The other one who's doing apple cobbler might be saying, "Hey, we have chefs ready to cook enough cobbler for your event." So that dictates a different series of activity. So every business, even if the words are even if keywords are overlapping, the purpose is different, and that dictates the solutions that you need to find for different companies. Some companies are heavy on digital ads. Some are heavy on, and the thing that was surprising for me is that how many were really leveraging content. There were some people that just were not the ads are that expensive, but the problem is that most businesses have they have this sort of outdated, they think of ads as just like a newspaper. If I show an ad, that's all I have to do. And that's not the case. You need to show them in conjunction with other content. And you have to think about which channel you do that on, whether it's Facebook, X, even now when you look at some of the newer social media, if you look at social audio, Clubhouse, Chatter, for example, is really good. I'm actually looking to make more moves in Chatter. They're very video oriented, and the challenge becomes now, how do you get your message out and how do you do measurement? And that part, these sort of things introduce a lot of dynamics, and smaller businesses just don't have a lot of time they know they have to play into this, but they don't always have a lot of time to work with it. And I'll say really quickly one other reason why I got into this. I mentioned about minority businesses.
Yeah.
Part of the reason, particularly with Black-owned businesses, there's two parts of it. You want to serve the community, and there's a lot of different ones in different communities. But part of the reason that message comes up is that it's finding services that can relate to you, whether it's for hair care, for example. That's a big deal. We actually, for Black consumers, index very highly among personal goods, just because people are finding things for hair, for razor bumps, that type of thing. And this was a way for me to kind of work with larger businesses that work with minority businesses while working with the larger ones as well. I mean, there's a lot of, it was a very unique balance that was very irresistible for me at the very start. And that's the thing that kind of got me into this, basically.
Yeah, I love that. You made two comments that I want to touch on, which I think are really interesting. The first is around content. TikTok, I think for TikTok kind of changed social media in a lot of ways, because they launched this video application where distribution was no longer based on how many followers you had or how much money you were willing to spend. Those things were helpful, but they weren't the deciding factor. They created a level playing field where the content would get exposed to larger and larger audiences based off engagement. And the democratization of reach because of TikTok, but then because Google launched Shorts and essentially copied it, and Instagram launched Reels and essentially copied it. Never in history does a small business have the same opportunity to reach an audience or go viral than a big company because of this algorithmic based approach to social media. Yeah. And on top of that, the small business entrepreneur actually has an advantage because they have a personality versus larger corporations that you don't know who their CEOs are, you don't know who their leaders are, or you don't know who the faces of their executives are, and they have to rent personality or rent the things that make those algorithms work by going out to influencers and creating partnerships. But a solo entrepreneur or a businessman who's willing to be out and in front of the camera and create content, they actually have an advantage because people relate to people versus companies. Yeah. Interesting time to be, in the content game as the perspective of, using social as a marketing channel.
Yeah, and I love that you mentioned about Reels too. It's harder now to have a advantage because there's so many things in programming that I don't want to say they copy. It's more like they overlap. So it doesn't take much for someone to come up with a feature counter that. I love that you brought Reels, and social audio is the same thing too. The folks who came up with Chatter, if I remember correctly, I think the gentleman who came up with Chatter used to work for Clubhouse. Yeah. So it just kind of, and then they're not the only two out there. There's a couple other ones. I think Spill, and there's another one that I can't think of the name of right now. But I think Isaac Hayes' son, I think, founded this third one. But the point is, it's not taking. You are right. It doesn't take a lot to have code and build something around it that becomes marketable and valuable. It's the reason why Mark Cuban talked about, we may be looking at an era where we can see, a solo founder becoming a billion-dollar company, with very little, basically. So,
Oh, yeah, that'll be exciting.
yeah.
Yeah, I want to talk to you about social audio because I haven't heard about it in a little while. It was something that kind of exploded during COVID, right? It was one of those, we'll call them the COVID darlings, right? So like whether it was Zoom, basically COVID ushered in more e-commerce, the video call became ubiquitous. And then Clubhouse was just exploding during COVID. I think part of it is based on what they provided to a population that was hunkered down in their house, not able to see friends, not able to go out and do the normal things that they would do from a socialization perspective. And then, as always, copycats emerge or people adopt somebody's unique business model as a feature. So X is probably where a percentage of people have gone to, what was Twitter Spaces and has became X Spaces. And I don't hear a Clubhouse in the conversation as much, but would you say it's still a contender and still has a shot for, mainstream social media ubiquitousness? Or what do you think social audio needs to do to kind of re-enter the mainstream?
Ooh, good question. And you're right. There is a little bit right now. It's a little bit of a challenge. I think there's a couple of things going on. It's a matter of how they're being managed. Like Clubhouse is still viable, but it's not really viable. I think the challenge is that it's more viable for as a casual use. It's almost like a Facebook of social audio in a lot of ways, where people just come and chat, and they're chatting about everything. There's still some things a small business owner could use, but I think the challenge is that there's not this financial model there in the same vein as you saw for social media in the early days, where, hey, we have Facebook, and for Facebook, their thing was selling ads. And you go to Twitter, their thing is selling ads. That era is sort of, I wouldn't call it, say it's dying out, but it's shifting. There's a lot of different areas that now marketers can place ads. You can place ads with Spotify, for example. You have there's a lot more options than just the social media options. So you have that challenge. And I think for there to be a little bit of relevance, I think what a lot of these social audio apps need to do, they need to think about if they can keep the moderation tight, which I think that's important. I think for every platform, they need to really think about how they moderate and keep trolling down to and bullying down to not quite zero, but something close to zero. I think that's one part of it. But they may have to be very creative about how they work with influencers. I know that's a big deal right now. That's been the next play. And there's a lot, it's a great way to do it because there's a lot of ways to influence. You don't have to be a Kardashian level, following. You can have there are micro influencers, people with small audiences, but their topics are so helpful and so direct that their audience is consistent. And these are the things that brands will pay into. So there's opportunity there, and you'll see opportunities from YouTube. You'll see opportunities from Instagram. They're trying to compete. The social audio, I think it will take a little bit of time, but I think Chatter is really pushing hard to get creators on there going. They really are. They're looking at different monetization where you can get paid. Actually, I saw something earlier today where he said, "Hey, what would you think if you pay a small fee to get paid much faster rather than end of the month?" Which that actually for small businesses is a big deal. You need something with transactions that are quick, just as you are for the large transactions as well to survive. So we'll see a little bit of that. But I think right now, I think the challenge is that there's only everyone's online, which is great, but there's only so much attention that people can give, and it's going to be a little bit of a challenge. We're going to see some things come up in terms of how people moderate and how people put options on the table for people to monetize their position. I think we're going to see a lot more of that going forward.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting perspective. I was on Clubhouse a lot during the pandemic, and there were a lot of really cool conversations happening there. And then when the pandemic ended, it kind of fell down a little bit. But then like, yeah, like the moderation component is important because sometimes you'll go in a room and it's just a free for all and it's very chaotic and it kind of like turns you off. And then, but at least what I like about Clubhouse is the diversity of topics that are happening. Like there are like very interesting communities talking about all different types of things, you know, sports, religion, dating, celebrities. And then you go over to X and it's really only political conversations, which, you know,
Yeah.
like maybe that's okay. Like maybe if you want to go over there and hear your favorite Twitter news personality from the left or the right and have a conversation and be engaged in a political conversation, I guess that's a good place for that. But I agree with you. Like creators bring something interesting because it's a better level of engage. It's a different way to engage with their fans than like comments, and it's a more intimate, like real engagement. So if creators brought their audiences over with them and they could moderate well and have that skill set to kind of host a room, I think that would be definitely something that would be a reason why I would show up. Like if I knew creator XYZ that I liked about a particular topic was going to host a 1 hour ask me anything about something interesting, and it was going to be, you know, not good production value from the perspective it's all kind of the same there, but more like, you know, it's not going to be a free for all. There's not going to be a lot of interruptions and people shouting and stuff like that. But I think you're onto something. I think some platforms, Snapchat famously didn't embrace the creator economy and they kind of suffered for it. And now they have with Spotlight. I think social audio needs to really be creator first and it will be successful.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it also ties in again to what you brought about with Reels, the idea that, again, if you think about how these things are how the programs are that run these, there's not a lot of difference. So they have to figure out, you know, with content, how to be unique and retain an audience. That's going to be an interesting fight from all these platforms. So
nice. So, what's a belief that you held about analytics or that you once held very strongly that you've changed your mind about completely?
Ooh, good. This is a good question. It's a really good question. Because you know, like I said, I've been doing this for about 16 years, and I hate to think that I'm still the same. You can't be the same person you were 16 years ago, or even 2 years ago, let alone 16. I would say the things I'm more cautious about. I'm a little bit more. Not that I'm cynical on social media, but I'm a little bit more cautious about the opportunity to go global, and I think I'm more protective about how people come to me online a little bit, and I think everyone is. It's a lot to do with, I think the great thing about being online is that, as I mentioned earlier, you have an opportunity to connect with people in different places. I mentioned about this for Black business owners. The United States, like, it's 14% African American, but it's not even 14% in every state.
Right.
So if I was in Arizona and I really want, I think it's like 4% in Arizona altogether. And I think it's mostly around Phoenix. But if I was looking for, let's say I was trying to look for something particularly for Black services, maybe for hair care to import in or something like that, I'd have to go online to find areas to find supplies or that type of thing. And I think that's where it's great. I think the other flip side is that because everybody is online, everyone comes in with a lot of different ideas of what they want to sell. I'm a little less, I don't think I was ever naive at the very beginning because there were certain boundaries I had set for myself about what type of customer I would not work with. But you have to think critically about how people hit your boundaries. That's what I think is missing when people talk about boundaries in general. Like, for example, the clients I would never work with at the very beginning were anything with multi-level marketing. That was one. They usually are just not. The problem with it is that in the 90s, I had people hit me up and say, "Hey, this is what's going to empower the Black community if we buy multi-level, multi-level marketing." I'm thinking,
yeah, there were some
way is not exactly the way to do that.
Predatorial business models that kind of were going after the African American community.
Yeah, and it became, and I think as the internet grew, predatory took different forms. Basically, I've met a lot of people that, and I think I've met a lot of people that most people have been pretty good. There's just been a very small fraction, And I think even then, when you talk to people online, one of the things I'm encouraging people to do is do not react at the beginning, because sometimes people can have honest mistakes where they believe in something so much, but they're not necessarily a bad person. It's just like if you were at a bar and both of you were rooting for the same football team or the same basketball team or soccer team. In a bar, you're great together. But once you're trying to do business, that person may be selling snake oil, down the way. So, root for your team. Recognize when snake oil is probably is entering the chat. So, so you have to think a little bit about the connection a little bit. There's little stuff like that I had to be careful of. I told people, the big ones, multi-level marketing. I stayed away from crypto, honestly, because it's unregulated. So you can have somebody that is, again, it's in fact, for crypto, there's only one person I've ever really liked, because I know she was not selling the crypto, but she talked a little about, blockchain and a lot of the technology behind it. So you have to really, when you're online, the biggest advice I'm giving people is, that I think and this comes from how I changed how I felt. You're going to find that things that you believed at the very beginning, sometimes the technology changes the avenue in which people can approach you on it, and you have to think about how your ethics online can be approached. It's okay to have a boundary, but you need to know how people are hitting that boundary. And I would say the biggest tip I would give is don't. I try not to argue with people online, to be honest with you, because it's sort of. I'm not expecting people to be perfect. It's just that you don't know what the motivation is. And sometimes people make honest mistakes. And sometimes it's just better to say, hey, look, this is not for me, or this may not be a fit. Clubhouse may be a little different. People yell in there, and that's okay. But outside everything else.
Well, I think you brought up, just some basic common sense around social media usage that so many people have lost. I think there's issues around being anonymous, right? So on platforms like Facebook or LinkedIn, for instance, your name and your personal brand is tied to what you say and what you do and how you behave. So you're a lot more, I would say, maybe you're a little bit more careful on how you, engage in conversations. But then when you take the ability to be anonymous on other platforms, whether it's Instagram or YouTube or X, then people's sense of getting caught or getting called out for their bad behavior kind of goes out the window. And I think the other thing too is, one of the best advice that I got as a young person was, if I was upset in a work environment, like if somebody emailed me something and I was, and if it got my blood pressure up and I wanted to immediately respond and I wanted to, type up a argument and then fire it right back to him. Anytime I had that feeling, he told me to draft the email, but put it in drafts and then wait till the next morning before I sent it. And what I generally found is if I did that exercise, when I came back to the email the next morning, I would end up deleting it completely. It had already resolved itself and it wasn't a big deal.
Yeah.
Or I toned it way down to something that was way more mellow and non-confrontational. And I was no longer elevating the situation. I was either de-escalating or admitting, where I had maybe made a mistake or XYZ, or being a lot more humble and approaching it from a perspective of problem solving versus being accusational. And I think if people took that same approach to their social media usage, if they just paused when agitated and thought about, what they were going to say, and then maybe saved it as a draft until the next day, we'd have a lot better, discourse on social media, especially platforms that allow for
you hit a really good point. I love that exercise. That's a good point. And you don't know what's driving the whole argument. I've had people yell at me for stuff, and I'm just like, I had one person yell at me. They had an argument with a family member, and the troubling part was I did not know either lady had been in contact with each other, let alone I'm getting this DM like, why are you contacting me about this? So I've had that. You have to be careful a little bit with online. You just don't, your environment doesn't show you the whole reason for things. And when I got, just real quick, on social media, when I first started, I really held back on having arguments. And I tried not to say things that were too triggering. Social audio, it's a little bit different because you can kind of hear the person's tone in real time. Even if
Yeah.
you're joking around, you can kind of hear it. But even then, I think there's still some things you have to be careful about because it's just like arguing on a phone. You don't see the whole thing.
Yeah,
So
the
it's
context is important sometimes with like voice inflection and how you say things. It definitely changes because people can interpret much more in text.
Yeah, and another reason I like your point too is that with the note is that as an entrepreneur, there's going to be you're going to have a lot of battles that you have to look up and say, you know what, this may not be the battle royale that I need to be in right now. There's another task I got to get to, and there's been times you have to learn how to do that really well and just not. Because otherwise, other customers are waiting on you, and you have to get to other people, and sometimes that's enough to make the day a little bit better.
Yeah,
So
choose the fire you want to put out, right?
yeah.
So, you've co-authored a couple of books, The Entrepreneur Within You and Faith, Failure, and Success. Tell me a little bit about these books. What are they about, and what got you, what kept you up at night so much that you wanted to write a book about these couple of topics?
Well, these are sort of what group author books I've done, and it was sort of done by accident. I had a third book I was working with Roddy Media, but unfortunately we ended up not doing it. But I'm trying to get a new one put together now. These two were a little bit more for the small business owner to help them to understand their journey. The first one, Entrepreneur with it. The Entrepreneur Within really is an ensemble book, and the woman who put it together, her name is Julie Holloway. She's an artist, but I'll tell you this, Dylan, she's probably the best person who I've ever seen to network with people because she just kept networking with all sorts of small business owners. And so she had a series with a small publisher, 220 Publishing. And that introduced me to a number of people as well too. So that was fun to do. And I kind of talked a little bit about my journey, but I also gave some practical tips in there as well. Same thing for that led to that second book, Faith, Failure, and Success. The publisher who owned 220 Publications launched that series. I was one of the initial authors. And there were a couple of learning lessons I've learned from that is if, a lot of times people hear the tip, go write a book, go write a book, go write a book.
Yep.
There's a couple of times where if you're doing a lot of,
there we go.
Yep. For example. So it's a good thing to do, but sometimes you may not have all the time set up. I think they can be a little hard to do if you're still working with customers in hand. And plus also a lot of people were asking me to write on analytics already. So I was already juggling a lot of balls as it was. So this was a great way of kind of working with other small business owners and kind of takes the load off. The one trick I would say is that make sure that everybody that you work with, if you do a group ensemble book, definitely, check them out and make sure that everyone's kind of, they don't have to be in the same market as you, but there needs to be some similarity of purpose. When we did the Faith, Failure, and Success, there were two editions. And we usually now promote the second edition. The first edition, unfortunately, had someone that was, they were dealing a little bit more with conspiracy theory on their pages. And the publisher had to take them off of that. So you can't do that as a business owner because there's a message that you start sending that says that you are not really servicing a customer. You are spending more time, with conspiracy theory, and it changes your audience. So there are people that will do that. Unfortunately, that goes back to the earlier discussion. But the good part is that Cinda Williams became the replacement author, and you may not know who she is, but she was in Mo Better Blues. There's a Spike Lee movie with Denzel Washington. She played I cannot think of her character's name, but she was the woman that was chasing after Denzel in the movie. But very terrific actor, and she's been in a lot of different stuff. And so we had a chance to. She came in. She knew the publisher very well and came in and did the substitute chapter for that. And that's been brilliant for everybody on the team. So sometimes beautiful things can come up from that as well.
Yeah.
I would say if you're a small business owner, don't avoid it.
No, I love it. I think, admittedly, and I've shared a lot about, the the process that I use to do Going Deep, which is my sales book, I worked with a ghostwriter because I don't really fancy myself as an amazing writer. Not really a ghostwriter because he's named, a co-writer, Nathan Pettyjohn, who's a good friend of mine, who actually runs social media for the second most wealthy African-American woman in the world, Janice Bryant Howroyd, who owns
Cool.
Apple Consulting.
Okay.
So he really kind of helped her. Like, she came to Nathan at one point in her career and she said, "Hey, I'm, almost as rich as Oprah and nobody knows who I am." She wasn't, people know her, but she wasn't known like on the level of like an Oprah or a Mark Cuban, et cetera. So he
Yeah.
kind of helped her build her professional brand and social, write her book, launch her podcast, do all those things, which I think is really cool. Because when you get to that level of success, the only thing that's left that you can't necessarily buy just off the shelf, like a yacht or something like that, is notoriety, right? You still have to work at that and earn it, and build it day by day by doing the things that you have to do. But yeah, I just we did Zoom sessions. He asked me questions. I just talked, and he edited it and used AI tools to kind of synthesize it. So I
Yeah.
feel like a book is almost table stakes these days for any kind of expert or person who wants to be involved in teaching and things like that, because it's a really great business card. It's kind of an encapsulation of your philosophies and stories about how you got to where you are. So yeah, no, I love that idea of what you talked about, is like, maybe, hey, if you don't have the resources to work with a ghostwriter, you don't even have the time, because it's still a lot of time, even if you're not pecking away at the keyboard. Showing up and talking with somebody and getting interviewed not one time but many times throughout the period of a series. It sounds like this ensemble is a really cool way to do it as well, and then you're getting a collection of stories from different people and kind of the co-promotion of the group coming together to market it and get it out there. So that's really cool.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And it's a good way to learn from other people too about their experiences. That was a big thing as well too.
I love it. So one of the other reasons you founded Zimana was to empower business owners to leverage analytics for profitability, not just reporting, but actually being able to drive bigger decisions around the business. Can you tell about, like, sometimes people have amazing sales numbers, they've got amazing traffic, they're doing all these things right, but then their profit margins aren't, in where they need to be. How can you use analytics to increase margin, not just top line revenue?
What analytics does is that it allows you to break down like what the drivers are. And particularly with AI now, you can do a lot of great things like forecast. You can make adjustments in what the factors are in forecasting much faster. I think that's the great part. It allows you to really kind of break down like not just sales, but also what is driving costs, and you can make forecasts. Look, if there's increase in unit costs for something, maybe there's an increase in even fixed costs over a long period, there may be some slight changes or have you. You can make some really good prediction models off of that. I think having the speed and being able to do that much more quickly is the advantage right now. I really do. We're in an economy where things are just more volatile. And it's easy to say that with the tariffs and what have you, but it's even more than that. It's the speed in which people can pay for something. Think about if you're just going to get fast food, for example. I remember when there were no apps, there were no mobile phones, and drive-throughs were just like, oh, this is a fast thing. But now, if you think about with a mobile phone app, I really like if I want to order like chili from Wendy's, so that's one of my favorites.
Yeah.
I can order that in an app. They have the order. They have to have it ready for me when I get down to my particular Wendy's and pick it up. That speeds up the pace in which orders are coming in, and that speeds up the pace in which money is coming in. And I think for all business owners, there's this sort of, you need to really think about, how it's almost like boiling water, and it's hard to determine things when it's just gradually going up. But if it's spiking up and changing, those things can be much more volatile. It can be hard to understand, how do you hold enough margin to cover costs? So those sort of things, I think we're going to be struggling with quite a bit. I'm actually working on tools right now, and even I'm actually working on a course that I'm going to put together on my own that will talk a little bit more about that as well, because I think there's a lot of things you can do with data now that was not possible. Well, let me back up and say this. It was possible, but we can do it now much more conveniently. And I think that's the part that we need to jump into.
All right. So of the work that you're doing at Zimana, what is the next 6 months to a year look like for you? What has you excited?
There was a couple of things excited. First of all, I mentioned a little bit of this earlier. I'm doing a lot more teaching on R, and I'm hoping that will change into some things with AI. I'm an adjunct for Champlain College. I work virtually with them. I got some undergraduates who are taking my course for the first time this summer. It's a brand new course I put together for them. And then I've been an adjunct for Trine for the last year. I'm getting ready to do year 2 with, I think this is year 2. It's roughly year 2, basically. And we're getting ready to get ready for that. And that course for Trine is a little different because we're using Tableau. So we're trying to help students understand how to use Tableau. It's a little bit more of a grad student thing. But I'm also trying to look at some independent courses of my own to create because simply put, there are a lot more things with analytics I'm seeing that clients need a little bit more education on, and we need to kind of corral those questions together. Used to be much simpler 16 years ago. It's a little bit more complicated now, but the job is always to streamline that. So I'm hoping to have some courses set up by the end of the year, and that's going to trigger another redesign of the website, so I have to get that done. And then also, I'm looking at some AI tools of my own to be able to produce and issue out for customers to try and use. And that's been kind of an ongoing development. I think right now we're kind of getting the hang of everything. So I'm looking to have that out also by 2026 as well.
Beautiful. Well, it sounds like you're a busy man. Lots of fun things to follow along if you guys stay in touch and follow Pierre. So on that note, Pierre, where would you like to send people to learn more about what you do or connect with you directly?
Okay, well, that's great. Well, I mentioned a little bit on Chatter. We're still trying to get the Chatter stuff to it together, but if you're not on social audio, that's okay. You can find me on LinkedIn, and I would say follow the Zimana page. We'll have tips and everything great for analytics for you if you're trying to follow that. And I share articles on my business page as well. And then I'm on Facebook, on Instagram, and on Threads as well too. And usually I'm sharing articles from CMSWire. That's one of the sites I've written for. So you'll get a chance to get some articles there on anything ranging from agentic AI to the impact with. I'm actually writing an article on Content Center and analytics for that. So definitely follow me on any of those platforms. And I'm more than happy to respond and answer questions.
I love it. Awesome. Well, thanks so much for coming on, Pierre. For those of you who are watching at home, if this is the first time you're seeing the show, don't forget to subscribe, follow wherever you're listening or watching the show. If you give us an honest review on social media, podcast sites, that's how we find a larger organic audience. And most importantly, if there is a business owner out there who you think is having trouble with analytics and could use a tune-up or a refresher and follow along with Pierre's thought leadership, or anybody out there who is juggling with this new AI revolution and where we're sitting in this fastly changing ecosystem every single day, it seems like there's a new twist. Don't forget to share the show with them, and we will follow along and catch you next time. Pierre, thanks so much for coming on. I appreciate you.
Dylan, this has been terrific. Thank you for having. I appreciate you too. And I'm always here for you, man.
We'll stay in touch. Bye-bye.
Take care.